Hey, Miguel Medina here with Singing Tree Flutes. We have a cedar alternating drone. I want to do a little instructional video if anybody's looking to purchase one of these or have already purchased one of these. They're my all-time favorite style drone flute. The diversity that it has, and it still implements the melody that we're all used to of the 6-hole flute. So start with a quick demo. All right, so I love the diversity in this style flute. As you can see, in that case, I played it rhythmically. I like to play these with drums. I'm a percussionist too, so I really like to add rhythm in there with it, and there's a lot you can do with it. And you can also play it slow and meditative, just like just like most people play the native flute. No problem doing that. So let's start with a quick instruction. By now, maybe you already know how to play the single 6-hole flute. You can use this flute that way. Here's our 2 blowholes right there. You can always just move your mouth to the 6-hole side of the flute and play the straight melody. If you're a beginner and you happen to own one of these flutes and are trying to learn on that, that's okay. Just you could refer to another video that I have. It says how to play the flute in 3 easy steps, and then you get started on that. And then, people usually later on, after they're, comfortable with the 6-hole single flute, they'll move to a drone flute. And this flute can be played as the standard 6-hole drone flute. That's the most common drone flute without this pinky hole here. And that gives you the flute, the drone, to drone at the fundamental note, in this case an A minor. So, and that just stays constant while you're playing the melody on the 6-hole side. Yes. And then for me, I almost always, not always, almost always like to have my drone flutes pop to the high octave. Relatively easy, hopefully it's not too hard for people to control that, but with a twitch of the tongue, pop that to the high octave. Well, so that's low A and high A. That right in itself adds a lot of diversity to your drone playing. And oftentimes if that note, like some makers will make it so it just stays at the bottom, and a lot of people really like, especially single flutes that really have a strong bottom note and they don't have to worry about it overblowing. I prefer to really practice my breath technique, because that is such a great option when you can use it properly in playing a melody. So by using the T sound with your tongue, that's the best way to easily pop that up to the high octave. If you don't want it to, you could try not to implement that technique when you get to the top notes on your melody side. So let me play that as a single first. There's no tongue techniques in that, and if I add the drone, most cases it's going to not pop to the high octave. But if I use the T sound, that should, most cases, pop it to the high octave. If I have to push with a little more breath because it's not popping, I'll learn that, and it just depends on what flute you have, how easily it's going to pop. And it could have to do with how much moisture is underneath there, how long you've been playing the flute. So. After you get it to pop to the high octave, if you stay with a consistent breath pressure, you should be able to stay at that high octave even without using the T sound on every note. Stay at that high octave until you get all the way to this note here, first hole uncovered. Once you hit that bottom note, you're going to want it to drop back to the low octave of the fundamental. Otherwise, the whole flute will probably overblow. So I'll show you. So that was just nice and easy. It didn't cause any disruption in the bottom of the bottom note of the flute. So there's that. And when you're ready to move from there, that's when you lift this pinky hole up. And when you do that, that will cause the flute to drone at the 5th of the scale. That is exactly the same as 3 fingers lifted off of the 6-hole side. Playing both together. Yeah, you hear a little bit of a warble in there, and those notes should sound almost exact, if not exactly the same. And when they're exactly the same, you won't hear that little warble. You'll just hear that it sounds like a single note. So then we learn to add that while we're playing our melody. Okay, so that's basically it. From there, it's practice. If you're having trouble keeping this hole sealed all the way, sometimes when you're first starting, that's a little bit awkward for people. They'll miss the hole and you'll get some squeaky. That might take some time, but you can really feel that hole. It is a rather large hole. It has to be in most of these flutes to be tuned properly. But you know, I've had a few small women where their pinky kind of sinks in there, and in that case, I might have to change the key so that the hole can be smaller. There's a little bit of options we can do, but for the most part, this is going to be around a 3/8, between 3/8 and ½ inch size hole. So anyway, learning to implement that. One of the keys that you can do is remembering which ones not to play with this hole lifted up. Hope that makes sense. So the biggest -- note that does not sound good with that is this note here. Do you see that note? That is the alternate fingering that comes after the 5th of the scale. So most people know by this point, when you're playing the 6-hole flute, in order to play the 4th hole from the bottom, you have to cross finger that with your pointer finger below that. So when playing that note, that's a half step above the 5th. That will sound dissonant when you play it. Here's an example. So for me now, it's muscle memory. That hole never gets lifted up when I'm playing that. I just know better just to keep that down when my pinky is up. But absolutely, I'll play it when that finger is covered. The other note that you can, but I almost never implement with the pinky lifted off is this note here. And that's just because that'll cause a break in the sound of the drone because it's the same note as the pinky uncovered. So here's an example of that. And that can be okay. That's not going to hurt anything or anything, but I just prefer to hear that drone constantly playing up and down that scale. So it's just muscle memory. This hole is always down when I'm lifting this finger. So that's what it'd sound like if I were to play them both. And it's like I said, it sounds okay, but I just by nature remember to keep that covered and play this note only when it's covered. That's just the way, that's my preference, I suppose. Okay, so there you have it. And the only other thing I can say is if you're having trouble with that, you can cover with keeping the pinky covered at first. Plug it with a cork or a piece of leather that ties, as long as it doesn't obstruct these holes here. Tie a piece of leather around that. It has to have a complete seal or it's still going to squeak on you. And then you can just play it as a 6-hole drone. And then on the days that you really feel like practicing and working on your dexterity, then go ahead and uncover it. So there you have it. I hope this helps you get started, and have a great day. All right.